We are anonymous. And today we are watching a story unfold that Donald Trump has spent years trying to outrun. A story that refuses to stay buried no matter how loudly he shouts or how aggressively he threatens. Let's slow this down and really look at what is happening. Because this moment is not just about photos. It is about history colliding with evidence. It is about timelines lining up in ways that can no longer be waved away. And it is about a man who has built his entire persona on dominance, control, and intimidation, suddenly finding himself unable to bully reality into submission. The release of 19 new photographs from Jeffrey Epstein's emails and estate is not random. These materials did not come from social media speculation or partisan leaks. They were recovered from Epstein's own digital archive and possessions now in the custody of investigators and lawmakers. The House Oversight Committee did not release them casually. Faces were redacted deliberately. Context was weighed carefully. And that alone tells you how serious this is. When you see Donald Trump standing next to individuals whose identities are shielded, you are not looking at a normal political photo op. You are looking at images deemed sensitive enough that Congress chose to obscure faces rather than risk re-traumatizing potential survivors. That choice matters. It tells you these are not just nameless party guests. It tells you the committee understood the gravity of what these images imply. And then there is the private jet photo. Trump aboard a plane with a young girl, face redacted. Again, no speculation about identity. None is needed. The issue is not who she is. The issue is why this image exists at all, why it was in Epstein's archive, and why Trump's name keeps reappearing in spaces that should have been off limits to him if he were truly the innocent bystander his defenders claim he is. Now zoom out, because even if these photos had never surfaced, the timeline alone is devastating. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were not casual acquaintances. They were close during the exact window when Epstein's trafficking operation was most active. This is not disputed. It is supported by flight logs, witness accounts, photographs, social calendars, and Trump's own statements. Epstein was recruiting and grooming girls out of Mar-a-Lago, out of the spa, on Trump's property. And Trump later joked on record that Epstein liked them young. That comment was not made in ignorance. It was made after years of proximity, after shared parties, after shared social circles, after shared secrets. Trump defenders love to say he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, but that claim has never been supported by documentation. What we do know is that Epstein continued operating for years. We know Trump continued rising in power. And we know girls continued being abused while powerful men continued protecting themselves. Look at the letter Trump wrote Epstein in 2003. It wasn't business correspondence. It wasn't distant. It was filled with sexual innuendo, inside jokes, references that only make sense in a relationship built on mutual understanding of indulgence and excess. And 3 years before that letter, Epstein was already grooming minors connected to Trump's world. Virginia Giuffre was one of those girls. She spent years fighting for her voice to be heard, years facing legal intimidation, years being doubted, mocked, and attacked. She testified under oath. She named names. She described systems, not just individuals. And she did all of this while the men she accused continued to move freely through halls of power. Her death this year was not just tragic. It was an indictment of a system that failed her repeatedly, a system that delayed justice until the cost became unbearable. And when we talk about these photos today, we must remember that behind every redacted face is a human being who once had no protection at all. Now let's talk about power dynamics, because this is the connective tissue that binds everything together. Donald Trump has a documented history of abusing power, especially over women and girls. This is not rumor. This is not anonymous accusation. This is Trump's own mouth. He bragged on the Howard Stern show about walking into dressing rooms at his beauty pageants while contestants were changing. He framed it as a perk of ownership, as entitlement. Multiple former contestants later confirmed this behavior, including teenagers. They described it as disturbing. They described it as violating. They described it as something they felt powerless to stop. He admitted to climbing into bed with a 22-year-old contestant while he was decades older. He bragged on tape about grabbing women because fame gave him permission. When you're a star, they let you do it. That sentence alone tells you everything you need to know about how he views consent when power is involved. This is not isolated behavior. This is a pattern. And patterns are what investigators look for, not just singular acts. The photos from Epstein's estate do not invent this pattern, they reinforce it. Now look at the wider circle revealed in these images. Epstein did not operate alone. He never could have. His entire operation depended on access to power. Political power, financial power, media power, and the photos show that access plainly. Steve Bannon appears repeatedly. Bill Clinton appears. Bill Gates appears. Richard Branson appears. Alan Dershowitz appears. Larry Summers appears. Ghislaine Maxwell appears. These are not fringe figures. These are people who shape policy narratives, markets, and law. And here is where Trump supporters attempt their favorite deflection. They say, what about Clinton? What about Gates? And the answer is simple. Investigate them all. Accountability does not weaken when it expands. It strengthens. Holding Trump accountable does not require shielding anyone else. No one gets a pass. But here is the difference Trump defenders don't want to confront. Trump is uniquely reactive to this issue. He panics. He lashes out. He screams at reporters. He dodges questions. He becomes erratic. Every time Epstein's name comes up, Trump's composure collapses. That is not coincidence. That is not media bias. That is behavior. And behavior tells stories words cannot. The novelty condom photo is a perfect example of the grotesque intimacy between Epstein and Trump. A bowl labeled Trump condoms, $4.50 each, printed with Trump's face and the words, "I'm huge." This wasn't satire created by critics. This was found among Epstein's possessions. Think about what that means. Think about the environment where that joke made sense. Think about the shared humor, the shared degradation, the shared worldview. Then there are the mirror selfies. Epstein and Bannon posing together. Epstein and others posing on planes, on islands, in private spaces. These are not accidental encounters. These are moments of comfort, of familiarity, of belonging. And this is why survivors were ignored for so long. Because when the people accused sit at the center of power, the system bends to protect them. Judges hesitate. Prosecutors delay. Media outlets tread carefully. Careers are weighed against truth. Survivors testified to Congress that they tried to speak for decades. They described courtrooms where their credibility was questioned more aggressively than their abusers. They described media interviews that never aired. They described settlements designed to silence, not heal. This is not just a failure of one administration. This is a systemic failure spanning parties, decades, and institutions. Trump is not unique in benefiting from it, but he is unique in how aggressively he has weaponized it. Now there are reportedly tens of thousands of documents still being processed. More photos, more emails, more names. This is not a single release, it is a drip feed. And drip feeds are devastating to people who rely on distraction and chaos to survive. Trump thrives on controlling the narrative, on flooding the zone, on overwhelming the public with noise. But evidence does not argue. It accumulates, it waits, and then it surfaces. As more survivors speak, as more materials are authenticated, as more lawmakers push forward despite intimidation, Trump's attention will fracture. He will rage, he will deflect, he will accuse, but he will not be able to erase the record. This is why this moment matters. Not because it delivers instant justice, but because it removes plausible deniability. It locks the past in place. It makes forgetting impossible. We are anonymous. We are not asking you to believe blindly. We are asking you to look carefully, to listen to survivors, to examine patterns, to refuse distraction. If you want this story to keep unfolding in the light, support independent voices, because silence is the last refuge of the powerful, and it only survives when the rest of us look away.